The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the dusty platform, and Fiona Nash pressed her gloved hand against the window, watching the small town of Wallace, Idaho materialize through the grime and heat of late summer 1884. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not from excitement but from the weight of the secret she carried like a stone in her chest. She was a widow, though the advertisement she had answered said nothing about her past, only that she was seeking a new beginning out west. The driver opened the door, and Fiona stepped down onto the wooden platform, her black traveling dress already collecting the fine dust that seemed to coat everything in this mining town tucked into the mountains. She clutched her carpetbag tightly and looked around at the rough buildings lining the main street. Wallace was smaller than she had imagined, more rugged, with men in work clothes trudging past, and the distant sound of mining operations echoing through the valley. "Miss Nash." A tall man approached from the shade of the general store. He wore worn denim pants, a clean shirt rolled to his elbows, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. When he drew closer, Fiona could see he was perhaps 30 years old, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of whiskey held up to lamplight. His jaw was strong, covered with a few days' stubble, and there was a wariness in his expression that matched the feeling in her own chest. "I am Fiona Nash," she said, extending her hand. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Kendrick Grayson. I appreciate you making the journey." He shook her hand briefly, his palm calloused and warm. "My ranch is about 8 miles outside of town. I have the wagon ready whenever you are." Fiona nodded, studying him in return. The correspondence between them had been practical, almost businesslike. He needed a wife to help run his ranch, someone who could cook, tend a garden, perhaps help with the books. She needed security and a place far from Philadelphia, far from the memories that haunted her like ghosts in every familiar street. "I am ready now," she said. "I have only what I brought with me." Kendrick gestured toward a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 horses at the end of the platform. He took her carpetbag without asking and loaded it into the back alongside several crates of supplies. Then he offered his hand to help her up onto the seat. His touch was gentle despite the obvious strength in his hands. As they rolled out of Wallace, following a rutted road that climbed into the forested hills, Fiona found herself stealing glances at the man beside her. He kept his attention on the horses and the road, his profile serious and unreadable. The silence between them stretched uncomfortably. "How long have you had your ranch?" she finally asked. 5 years. Built most of it myself with help from a few hands." He paused, then added, "My wife died 3 years ago. Fever took her in the winter." The words hung in the air between them. Fiona felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of shared grief. "I am sorry for your loss," she said quietly. "And you have never married?" he asked, though his tone suggested it was more formality than genuine curiosity. This was the moment. Fiona took a breath and folded her hands in her lap. "I was married. My husband died 2 years ago in an accident at the factory where he worked. I am a widow, Mr. Grayson." Kendrick pulled gently on the reins, slowing the horses. He turned to look at her fully for the first time, his golden brown eyes searching her face. Fiona braced herself for anger, for accusations of dishonesty, for the demand that she return to Wallace on the next stage. Instead, his expression softened. "So you know how to love," he said simply. The words struck her with unexpected force. Tears burned at the back of her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I do," she whispered. "I know how to love and how to lose. Then you are exactly what this place needs." He clicked his tongue to the horses and they resumed their pace. "I've had enough of loneliness, had enough of eating cold beans and sleeping in an empty house. I need someone who understands what it means to build something with another person, even knowing it might not last forever. Fiona looked at him with new eyes. That is a sad philosophy. It is a realistic one. Out here, nothing is certain. Weather can destroy a crop. Wolves can take cattle. A man can break his leg and die before anyone finds him. He glanced at her again. But that does not mean we stop trying. It means we appreciate what we have while we have it. They traveled the rest of the way in a different kind of silence, one that felt less uncomfortable and more contemplative. The road climbed higher into the mountains, winding through stands of pine and aspen. The air grew cooler and cleaner. Eventually, they crested a ridge and Kendrick pointed down into a broad valley below. There. That is home. Fiona looked where he indicated and felt her breath catch. The ranch spread across the valley floor, with a sturdy log house positioned near a creek that sparkled in the afternoon sun. Outbuildings dotted the property, including a large barn and several corrals where horses grazed. The mountains rose on all sides, creating a natural amphitheater that was both protective and breathtaking. "It is beautiful," she said, and meant it. "It is hard work," he corrected, but she could hear the pride in his voice. "But it is good land. The creek never runs dry and there is enough grass for a decent herd. I run cattle and horses, sell some to the miners in town, others to the army posts further south." As they descended into the valley, Fiona could see more details. The house was well built, with a covered porch and real glass windows. Smoke rose from the chimney, which surprised her until she saw a figure emerge from the barn, a wiry man with gray hair and a bow-legged walk. "That is Charlie," Kendrick explained. "He has been with me since the beginning. Lives in the bunkhouse with two younger hands, Jack and Martin. They are out with the herd right now." Charlie raised a hand in greeting as the wagon rolled into the yard. His weathered face broke into a grin when he saw Fiona. "Well now, boss finally got himself some proper company," he said, coming to help with the horses. "Madam, I am Charlie Foster. Been keeping this place from falling apart while waiting for you to arrive." "Fiona Nash," she said, warming to his friendly manner. "I hope I can live up to your expectations. Just having someone who can cook better than this stubborn mule will be an improvement," Charlie said, jerking his thumb at Kendrick. Kendrick shook his head, but there was amusement in his eyes. "Help me with these supplies, then get back to whatever you were doing. Miss Nash will need time to settle in." Charlie winked at Fiona before leading the horses toward the barn. Kendrick gathered her bag and the supplies, and Fiona followed him up the porch steps into the house. The interior was simple but clean. A large main room served as kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A table and chairs sat near the kitchen area, which had a good iron stove and open shelves holding dishes and provisions. Doorways led to what she assumed were bedrooms. "I have been sleeping in the back room," Kendrick said, setting down the crates. "The front bedroom is larger. It was meant for—" He trailed off, then cleared his throat. "It has a good mattress and a wardrobe. You can have your privacy there." Fiona understood what he was not saying. This was to be a marriage of convenience, at least at first. She felt both relieved and strangely disappointed. "Thank you," she said. "That is very considerate. We will have the ceremony tomorrow in town if that suits you. Pastor Mitchell can do it after Sunday service. Then you will be legally Mrs. Grayson and entitled to everything here." He met her eyes. "I want you to understand that I am an honest man. What is mine will be yours. I expect hard work, but I will never mistreat you. If this arrangement does not work, I will see that you have enough money to go wherever you wish." "I did not come here planning to leave," Fiona said firmly. "I came to build a new life. I will work hard, Mr. Grayson. You will not regret bringing me here." Something flickered in his eyes, approval perhaps, or hope. "Call me Kendrick. We will be married tomorrow after all. Then you should call me Fiona." He nodded slowly. "Fiona, that is a good name, strong." She smiled, a genuine smile that felt strange after so long. "My mother was from Ireland. She always said the name meant fair one, but I think she just liked how it sounded. It suits you." He gestured around the room. "I will show you where everything is. The well is out back, pump is new and works well. We have chickens in the coop behind the house. They are yours to tend if you are willing. The root cellar is stocked for winter, but we will need to add more when harvest comes. The garden has been neglected, I am afraid." Fiona removed her bonnet and set it on the table. "I am good with gardens. My husband and I had a small plot in the city. I can make things grow." She had not meant to mention Thomas so casually, but the words came naturally. Kendrick did not flinch at the reference. "Then you will do better than I have. Come, I will show you the rest." He gave her a tour of the house, pointing out the good root cellar, the pantry stocked with basics, the way the bedroom windows faced east to catch the morning light. His first wife had chosen some of the furnishings, he explained matter-of-factly, but if Fiona wanted to change anything, she could. The back bedroom where he slept was sparse, just a bed and a trunk, almost monastic in its simplicity. When the tour was complete, Kendrick left her to unpack and rest from her journey. Fiona stood in the front bedroom, her bedroom now, and looked around at what would be her new life. The room was indeed spacious, with a large bed covered in a quilt that showed skilled handiwork, a wardrobe made of golden pine, and a washstand with a porcelain basin and pitcher. A window looked out over the creek and the mountains beyond. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her dresses in the wardrobe and placing her brush and mirror on the washstand. At the bottom of her carpet bag was a small daguerreotype in a leather case. She opened it and looked at Thomas's face, forever young at 26, forever smiling in that slightly stiff way people had when they posed for photographs. "I hope you would understand," she whispered to the image. "I cannot live in that room forever, looking at your empty chair. I need to find a way forward." She closed the case and placed it in the drawer of the washstand, not hidden but not displayed either. Thomas was part of her past, part of what made her who she was, but he could not be her future. A knock on the doorframe made her turn. Kendrick stood there, hat in hand. "I am starting supper. I do not expect you to cook tonight after your journey, but you are welcome to join me." "Nonsense," Fiona said, brushing past him into the main room. "You have had to cook for yourself long enough. Let me see what I can do with what you have." She found flour, lard, salt pork, and canned tomatoes in the pantry, along with dried beans and rice. The root cellar yielded potatoes and onions. It was not much, but it was enough. She built up the fire in the stove and set to work, her hands remembering the familiar motions of cooking even as her mind spun with all the changes of the day. Kendrick sat at the table, ostensibly mending a piece of tack, but she could feel him watching her. She did not mind. There was something oddly intimate about working in the same space, the domesticity of it a balm to her nervous energy. "You said your husband worked in a factory," Kendrick said after a while. "In Philadelphia." "Yes. He worked at Cramp's shipyard building steam engines." Fiona peeled potatoes as she spoke. "It was good money but dangerous work. A chain broke and a heavy piece fell. They said he died quickly." "I am sorry. That is a hard way to lose someone. There is no easy way." She looked at him over her shoulder. "How did your wife die?" "Fever, like I said. Started as a cold in December, turned to pneumonia. We were snowed in for weeks. By the time I could get her to a doctor in Wallace, it was too late." His hand stilled on the leather. "Her name was Margaret. She was a good woman, gentle and kind. This life was hard on her, harder than she let on, I think. Was she from the East as well? Yes, from Ohio. We met when I was working on the railroad, married quick and came here to start fresh. He resumed his work, pulling the stitching tight. She wanted children, but it never happened. Maybe that was a blessing, given how it ended. Fiona put the potatoes on to boil and began slicing the salt pork. Do you want children? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Kendrick set down the tack and looked at her directly. I do, he said quietly. But I will not force the matter. You have been through enough without pressure from me. We will see how things develop. His honesty and restraint touched her. I think I would like children as well, she admitted. Thomas and I tried, but I never conceived. I do not know if the fault was mine or his, or no one's fault. Some things just are. He stood and went to the window, looking out at the darkening valley. I believe in being plain about things, Fiona. I find you attractive, and I hope that in time we might have a real marriage in all ways. But I will not rush you. You will let me know when or if you are ready. Heat rose to her cheeks, but she appreciated his directness. Thank you for your patience. He turned back to her with a slight smile. I have been alone for 3 years. I can wait a while longer for the right reasons. They ate supper together as the last light faded from the sky. The meal was simple but good, and Fiona felt a quiet satisfaction in providing it. They spoke of practical things. The schedule of the ranch, when the hands would return, what supplies would be needed from town. It was easy conversation, comfortable, and Fiona felt some of the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar room, Fiona stared at the ceiling and listened to the sounds of the ranch settling around her. Somewhere an owl hooted. The creek burbled steadily. In the back bedroom, she could hear Kendrick moving around, the creak of his bed as he lay down. She thought about his words. So you know how to love. It was true. She did know how to love, and she knew the cost of it. But she also knew that a life without love was merely existence. Thomas had taught her that joy was worth the risk of pain. Perhaps this rough rancher with his sad eyes and gentle hands could teach her that it was possible to love twice in one lifetime. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Fiona woke to the smell of coffee and found Kendrick already up, dressed in clean clothes that were clearly his best, though still work-worn. He had shaved and combed his hair, and she realized with a start that today was their wedding day. I heated water for you, he said, gesturing to a kettle on the stove. Take your time. Service is not until 10. Fiona washed and dressed carefully in her best dress, a deep blue silk that she had worn to Thomas's funeral and then packed away. It seemed fitting to wear it today, a bridge between her past and future. She pinned her auburn hair up carefully and wished she had something more festive, but this would have to do. When she emerged, Kendrick stood and simply looked at her for a long moment. You look beautiful, he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her cheeks warm. You look very handsome yourself, she replied, and meant it. In his clean clothes, with his face shaved and his bearing straight, he was a striking man. They rode to Wallace in the wagon, the early morning air fresh, and the road less dusty after a brief rain in the night. The town was more active on Sunday morning, with families making their way toward the small white church at the end of the main street. Fiona felt her stomach flutter with nerves as they approached. The church was simple but well kept, with wooden pews and a plain cross above the altar. Pastor Mitchell greeted them at the door, a kindly man in his 50s with wire-rimmed spectacles and a warm handshake. Mr. Grayson, this must be your bride, he said, beaming at Fiona. Welcome to Wallace, my dear. We are glad to have you join our community. Thank you, Pastor, Fiona said. I am grateful to be here. Charlie was already inside, sitting in the back pew and serving as their witness. A few other townspeople had gathered, curious about the mail-order bride who had come to marry the reclusive rancher. Fiona felt their eyes on her but kept her head high. The ceremony was brief and traditional. Fiona repeated the vows she had spoken once before to another man, and this time they felt both familiar and strange. When Kendrick slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, his hand was steady and warm. The ring fit perfectly. "You may kiss your bride," Pastor Mitchell said with a smile. Kendrick cupped her face gently with both hands and leaned down to kiss her. It was chaste and brief, but Fiona felt the warmth of it spread through her chest. When he pulled back, his eyes held a question and a promise. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Grayson," the pastor announced, and the small congregation applauded. After the service, several townspeople came forward to introduce themselves. There was Martha Henderson, who ran the boarding house, and her husband Samuel, who owned the general store. There was the schoolteacher, Miss Abigail Wright, a prim woman in her 30s who welcomed Fiona warmly. The doctor, an older gentleman named Paul Carter, shook her hand and told her to come see him if she needed anything at all. "Wallace is a small town, but we look after our own," Martha said, patting Fiona's arm. "You come visit me sometime. We can have tea and I will introduce you to the other ladies." Fiona thanked her, genuinely touched by the welcome. She had expected wariness or judgment, but these people seemed simply happy that Kendrick had found someone. They stopped at the general store on the way out of town. Samuel Henderson helped load supplies into the wagon while his wife told Fiona about the women's church circle that met every other Wednesday. Kendrick bought Fiona a bolt of pretty calico fabric and some lace trim, insisting she would need new things for the house. On the ride back to the ranch, now officially their ranch, Fiona studied the gold band on her finger. "Did this belong to your first wife?" she asked quietly. "No, I bought it last week from the jeweler in town. I buried Margaret with her ring." He glanced at her. "I would not give you another woman's ring. You deserve your own." The thoughtfulness of the gesture moved her. "Thank you, I will treasure it. It is just a ring." "No," she said firmly, "it is a symbol. It means something." He nodded slowly, understanding passing between them. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that was at once strange and comfortable. Fiona threw herself into work, determined to prove her worth. She tended the chickens, collected eggs, and expanded the vegetable garden, planting late-season crops that would mature before the first frost. She learned to make bread in the temperamental oven, to churn butter, to preserve vegetables in the root cellar. The ranch hands, Jack and Martin, returned from moving cattle to higher pastures. They were young men, barely 20, with easy smiles and endless appetites. Fiona found herself cooking for 5 at every meal, preparing hearty fare that the men devoured with gratitude and compliments. Charlie became a fast friend, full of stories about the territory and always ready with a joke when the work got hard. Kendrick worked from dawn until after dark most days, repairing fences, tending livestock, preparing for winter. Fiona would watch him sometimes when he did not notice, admiring the economical way he moved, the competence in everything he did. He was unfailingly kind to her, thanking her for meals, asking about her day but maintaining a respectful distance. They slept in separate rooms, and Fiona told herself she was grateful for the space, the time to adjust. But sometimes at night she would wake and feel the emptiness of the bed beside her, remember what it was like to fall asleep next to someone, to feel another's warmth. She wondered if Kendrick felt the same loneliness. One evening in late September, after supper had been cleared and the hands had retreated to the bunkhouse, Fiona sat on the porch mending one of Kendrick's shirts. The air was turning crisp with the promise of autumn. Kendrick sat beside her, working on his ledgers by lamplight. "The garden looks good," he said without looking up. "You have a talent for it. It is satisfying work. I like seeing things grow. We will have more vegetables than we can use. You should preserve some to sell in town. Martha Henderson is always looking for quality goods for the boarding house." Fiona considered this. "I could do that, and perhaps some jams as well if we can gather enough berries. There are wild huckleberries up in the high meadows. I could take you up there next week if the weather holds." She looked at him, surprised. "That would be lovely." "I have never picked wild berries before." He finally met her eyes, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Then it is time you did. This country has good things to offer if you know where to look." The following week, true to his word, Kendrick loaded a pack-horse with supplies and led Fiona up into the mountains. The ride took several hours, climbing through stands of pine and aspen that were just beginning to turn gold. The air was thin and clean, scented with resin and fallen needles. They reached the meadow in late morning. It spread across a high plateau, thick with grass and dotted with low bushes heavy with dark purple berries. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks already dusted with early snow. "This is breathtaking," Fiona said, dismounting and turning in a slow circle. "I have never seen anything so beautiful." "I used to come up here with Margaret," Kendrick said, tying the horses to a picket line. "She loved it too. I hope you do not mind that I brought you here." "I do not mind," Fiona said softly. "Your memories of her do not hurt me. She was part of your life. I would not want you to forget her." He studied her for a long moment. "You are a remarkable woman, Fiona Grayson." The way he said her new name sent a small thrill through her. They spread out with baskets and began picking berries, working companionably in the warm sunshine. Fiona's fingers turned purple from the juice, and she laughed at the sight. Kendrick smiled at her laughter, a full, genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. They ate lunch sitting on a fallen log, sharing bread and cheese and cold chicken. Kendrick told her about learning to ranch, the mistakes he had made early on, the hard lessons the land had taught him. Fiona told him about growing up in Philadelphia, the crowded streets and tall buildings so different from this open country. "You miss the city?" he asked. "Sometimes I miss the convenience of it, having shops nearby and people around. But I do not miss the noise or the soot or the sense of being trapped by all those buildings." She looked out at the vast expanse of mountains and sky. "Here I can breathe. Here there is room to be." "Yes," he said quietly, "that is exactly it, room to be." Their eyes met and held. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Kendrick stood and offered his hand to help her up. "We should pick more berries before the light changes," he said, his voice slightly rough. They worked through the afternoon, filling baskets with the sweet tart berries. When they finally started back down the mountain, the sun was low, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Fiona felt happier than she had in years, her heart light and her hands productive. That night, after they had unloaded the berries and Fiona had started the first batch of jam, she found Kendrick on the porch, looking at the stars. "Thank you for today," she said, coming to stand beside him. "It was perfect. I am glad you enjoyed it." He hesitated, then added, "I have not felt this content in a long time, Fiona. You have brought life back to this place. You have given me a home when I desperately needed one. I think we are even." He turned to face her, his expression serious in the starlight. "I know we agreed to take things slow, but I need you to know that this is not just a business arrangement for me anymore. I find myself thinking about you constantly. When I am working, I am thinking about getting back to hear your voice. When I eat, I am grateful not just for the food but for the care you put into making it. When I lie awake at night, I wish." He stopped, shaking his head. "I am saying this poorly." Fiona's heart was pounding, "No, you are saying it perfectly. I am falling in love with you," he said simply. "I do not know if it is too soon to say that, but it is the truth. You do not have to feel the same way. I just needed you to know." She stepped closer to him, close enough to feel the heat of his body. "I think I am falling in love with you too. It terrifies me because I know what it costs to lose someone you love, but I also know that a life without love is not really living." He reached up and cupped her face gently, the same way he had during their wedding kiss. "I cannot promise nothing will ever happen to me. This life is unpredictable, but I can promise that I will do my best to stay safe, to come home to you every day, to build a life with you that is worth having." "That is all any of us can promise," she whispered. This time when he kissed her, it was not chaste or brief. It was deep and searching, full of longing and promise. Fiona wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with equal passion, feeling something inside her unlock and open. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "Will you share my room tonight?" Kendrick asked, his voice husky. "Properly as my wife?" "Yes," Fiona said without hesitation. "Yes, I will." He took her hand and led her inside. At the door to the back bedroom, he paused. "I have dreamed of this, but now that the moment is here, I find I am nervous as a boy." Fiona smiled and touched his face. "So am I, but we will figure it out together." They went inside and closed the door, and for the first time since coming to Idaho, Fiona felt completely home. Kendrick was gentle and patient, learning her body as she learned his, and when they finally came together, it felt like a new beginning, a healing of old wounds through new connection. Afterward, lying in his arms in the narrow bed, Fiona felt tears slide down her cheeks. "What is wrong?" Kendrick asked, instantly concerned. "Nothing is wrong, these are happy tears." She pressed her face against his chest. "I did not think I would feel this way again. Safe, wanted, loved." "You are all of those things," he said, stroking her hair. "And you always will be, for as long as I draw breath." She fell asleep listening to his heartbeat, steady and strong under her ear. The months that followed were the happiest Fiona had ever known. She and Kendrick settled into their life together, working side by side during the day and sharing their nights with growing intimacy and affection. The physical connection between them deepened their emotional bond, and Fiona found herself more in love with him than she had thought possible. Winter came to the mountains in November, blanketing the valley in snow. The ranch work slowed but did not stop. Fiona spent her days cooking, sewing, and managing the household while Kendrick and the hands tended to the livestock and kept everyone supplied with firewood and fresh meat. The dark months brought them even closer together. Long evenings spent by the fire talking, reading aloud, or simply sitting in comfortable silence. In January, Fiona realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she said nothing, not wanting to raise hopes that might be dashed. But when February came and went with no change, she could no longer deny the truth. She was pregnant. She chose to tell Kendrick on a Saturday evening after supper. The hands had gone to town for the night, leaving them alone in the cozy house. She waited until they were settled by the fire, her heart racing with nervous excitement. "Kendrick, I have something to tell you." He looked up from the book he was reading, immediately attentive. "What is it?" "I am with child. I am fairly certain now. The baby should come sometime in August." For a moment he just stared at her, his face frozen in surprise. Then a smile broke across his features, transforming him with joy. He set aside his book and crossed to her, kneeling before her chair and taking her hands. "Truly, we are going to have a baby." "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Are you happy?" "Happy." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "Fiona, I am more than happy. I am grateful. I am blessed. I am terrified. I am everything all at once." She hugged him back, feeling his heart pounding against hers. "So am I. I wanted this so much but was afraid to hope." He pulled back to look at her face, his eyes bright. "You will be a wonderful mother, and I will do everything in my power to take care of you both. I know you will." They spent the rest of the evening making plans, talking about names and preparing the front bedroom as a nursery. Kendrick was like a different man, animated and excited, already planning how to build a cradle and what they would need from town. Watching him, Fiona felt her heart overflow with love for this good man who had taken her in and given her not just a home, but a future. The pregnancy progressed well. Dr. Carter visited monthly as the weather permitted, pronouncing Fiona healthy and strong. Martha Henderson and the other ladies from town took Fiona under their collective wing, offering advice, lending baby clothes and blankets, and generally fussing over her. Fiona had never had such a community of support, and she cherished it. Kendrick was fiercely protective, insisting she not overwork, doing tasks that were traditionally hers to save her strength. She sometimes had to remind him that she was pregnant, not fragile, but she appreciated his care. At night, he would talk to her growing belly, telling their unborn child about the ranch and the mountains and all the things they would do together. In early August, on a sweltering afternoon when the heat lay thick over the valley, Fiona felt the first pangs of labor. Martha Henderson had come to stay for the last few weeks, and she immediately took charge, sending Charlie racing to town for Dr. Carter and ordering Kendrick to boil water and stay out of the way. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Kendrick paced the porch like a caged animal, unable to stay still, jumping at every sound from the bedroom. Charlie and the younger hands tried to distract him, but nothing helped. He could only think of Fiona and pray that she and the baby would be all right. Finally, in the late afternoon of the second day, a baby's cry split the air. Kendrick froze, his heart in his throat, waiting. A moment later, Martha appeared at the door, her face exhausted but smiling. "You have a son, Kendrick, a fine, healthy boy, and Fiona is tired but doing well." He practically ran into the bedroom. Fiona lay in the bed, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale with exhaustion, but she was smiling. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was a tiny red-faced baby with a shock of dark hair. "Come meet your son," Fiona said softly. Kendrick approached on shaking legs and looked down at the child. He had never seen anything so small and perfect. The baby's eyes were closed, his little fists waving in the air. Kendrick reached out one calloused finger and the baby's hand closed around it with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Kendrick whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Fiona, you are amazing. Thank you for this gift." "We made him together," she said, looking up at him with tired but happy eyes. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son, Kendrick knew. "Thomas," he said. "Thomas Kendrick Grayson, after your first husband, if you agree. He was part of what made you who you are, and I want our son to carry that forward." Fiona's eyes filled with tears. "Are you certain you would do that?" "I am certain. Thomas loved you and lost you too soon. This way his name lives on." She reached up and pulled him down to kiss him, their son nestled between them. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you so much, Kendrick. And I love you, both of you, my family." Little Thomas thrived from the start, growing strong and healthy under his parents' devoted care. Fiona loved every moment of motherhood, even the difficult ones. Kendrick was a natural father, gentle and patient, spending hours with the baby cradled against his broad chest, walking the porch at night when Thomas fussed, singing off key lullabies that somehow always worked. The ranch prospered as well. The cattle multiplied, the horses sold well, and Kendrick was able to hire another hand and expand his operations. Fiona's preserves and jams became popular in Wallace, providing a steady extra income. They were building something solid and lasting. When Thomas was 6 months old, Fiona realized she was pregnant again. This time the news was met with joy unmarred by surprise or fear. They had proven they could do this together. Their daughter, Catherine Margaret Grayson, was born the following summer, a beautiful baby with her mother's auburn hair and her father's golden eyes. Thomas, now a toddling little boy, was fascinated by his tiny sister, always wanting to help care for her. The years passed in a blur of growth and happiness. The children thrived in the mountain air, running wild on the ranch, learning to ride almost before they could walk. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working alongside his father. Catherine was bright and fearless, forever exploring and asking questions. Fiona and Kendrick's love only deepened with time. They had learned to navigate the challenges of life together, supporting each other through hard seasons and celebrating the good ones. The physical passion between them never faded, and they often stole moments alone when they could, keeping their connection strong. When Thomas was 7 and Catherine 5, Fiona gave birth to twins, 2 more boys they named Samuel and Charlie, after their friends in town and on the ranch. The house was suddenly full to bursting with noise and laughter and love. Charlie Foster, now graying and slowing down, declared himself the children's honorary grandfather and spent hours telling them wild stories and teaching them card games. Martha Henderson visited regularly, bringing treats and feminine wisdom that Fiona treasured. The community of Wallace embraced the Grayson family completely. One evening, when the twins were about 2 years old, Fiona and Kendrick sat on the porch in their old familiar spots, watching the sun set over the mountains. The children were finally asleep, the house quiet for the first time all day. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you had not answered my advertisement?" Kendrick asked, reaching over to take her hand. "Sometimes," Fiona admitted. "I think I would have remained in Philadelphia, slowly withering into loneliness. I certainly would not have had all this." She gestured at the ranch, the mountains, the house full of sleeping children. "I would have missed out on the greatest love of my life. I thought Thomas was the love of your life. He was, for that time in my life. But you are the love of my life now, the father of my children, my partner in everything. Thomas was my first love, but you are my truest love. Both things can be real." Kendrick lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. "You are wiser than I will ever be. I am a lucky man, Fiona Grayson. And I am a lucky woman. When I stepped off that stagecoach 6 years ago, I was running from grief and looking for safety. I found so much more. I found home. I found purpose. I found you." "So you know how to love," he said, echoing his words from that first day. "I do," she replied, smiling. "And I will love you for the rest of my days." He stood and pulled her to her feet, wrapping his arms around her and swaying gently in the twilight. Somewhere inside, a baby started to fuss, and they both smiled. "Duty calls," Fiona said, starting to pull away. "Wait," Kendrick said, holding her a moment longer. "I just want to remember this moment. You and me and all we have built together. This is everything I ever wanted, everything I never dared hope for after Margaret died. You brought me back to life, Fiona. And you gave me a reason to live again," she replied, touching his face tenderly. "We saved each other." The years continued to roll forward, bringing challenges and triumphs in equal measure. A hard winter when they nearly lost half the herd but pulled through with determination and teamwork. A summer when Catherine broke her arm falling from a horse, giving them all a terrible fright. The joy of watching Thomas take his first solo ride to town, becoming a young man before their eyes. Through it all, Fiona and Kendrick remained each other's anchor and compass. They had learned that love was not just a feeling but a choice, made new every day. They chose each other in the small moments and the large ones, building a life of meaning and connection. The children grew and thrived, each developing their own personality. Thomas became a skilled rancher, already talking about taking over the operation someday. Catherine developed a passion for horses and a talent for training them. The twins were inseparable, always getting into mischief together, but fiercely loyal to each other and their family. When Thomas was 14, Fiona took him aside one evening and showed him the daguerreotype she had kept all these years, the image of a young man frozen in time. "This was Thomas Nash, the man you were named after," she said gently. "He was my first husband, and I loved him very much. He died before we could build the life together that we dreamed of, but he would be so proud of you, of the fine young man you are becoming." Young Thomas studied the photograph carefully. "Do you still miss him?" "Sometimes," Fiona admitted, "but it is a gentle missing now, not a sharp pain. I am grateful I knew him, and I am grateful I found your father. Life is not always straightforward, but it is always precious. Father says you saved him from being alone forever. And he saved me from the same fate. We saved each other. Remember that, Thomas. The best partnerships are between people who choose to lift each other up, day after day." Her son hugged her tightly. "I will remember, Ma. I promise." The ranch continued to prosper under Kendrick's careful management. They expanded their horse breeding operation, and Grayson horses became known throughout the territory for their quality. Kendrick taught all the children the skills they would need to run a ranch, but he also encouraged their education, hiring a tutor and ensuring they could read, write, and cipher well. Fiona remained involved in the community, now teaching some of the younger women in town how to preserve food and manage a household. She and Martha Henderson became inseparable friends, more like sisters. The Grayson home was known for its hospitality, with guests always welcome at their table. On their 10th anniversary, Kendrick surprised Fiona with a trip to Coeur d'Alene, just the two of them, leaving the children in Martha's capable care. They spent 3 days at a hotel, taking long walks, eating in restaurants, and rediscovering each other away from the demands of ranch and family. "I never thanked you properly for the name you gave our firstborn," Fiona said as they sat by the lake watching the sunset. "It meant more to me than I can express that you honored Thomas that way. He was part of your story, and your story is now part of mine," Kendrick replied. "I could not resent a dead man for loving you first. I am just grateful I got to love you second and forever." "Forever," Fiona agreed, leaning against his shoulder. "That is a beautiful promise. It is one I intend to keep." The children began to leave home as they grew older. Thomas went to study agriculture at the Territorial College, planning to bring new techniques back to the ranch. Catherine surprised everyone by deciding to become a teacher, following in Miss Wright's footsteps. The twins talked about starting their own ranch someday, working together as they always had through it all. Fiona and Kendrick remained at the heart of it all, the foundation on which the family was built. They aged gracefully together, silver threading through their hair, lines deepening around their eyes from squinting at bright mountain sun and from smiling at each other's jokes. One spring evening, when they were both in their 50s and the children were grown, Fiona and Kendrick walked up to the high meadow where they had picked huckleberries all those years ago. The climb was harder now, their bodies not as young as they once were, but the view from the top was still breathtaking. They spread a blanket and sat looking at the mountains, peaceful in each other's company. "You remember the first time we came up here?" Kendrick asked. "I remember thinking I had never seen anything so beautiful. I still think that every time." I almost told you I loved you that day. I had to bite my tongue to keep from saying it too soon." Fiona laughed. "I was falling in love with you then too. I just did not know it yet." "We have had a good life, Fiona, better than I ever imagined possible." "The best life," she agreed. "4 beautiful children, a ranch that thrives, a community that cares for us, and through it all we had each other. We still have each other. Yes, we do, for many more years, I hope." Kendrick pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "For all the years we are given, I will love you until my last breath and beyond." That is quite a promise from a practical rancher. Practical enough to know a miracle when I see one. You are my miracle, Fiona. The day you stepped off that stagecoach was the day my life truly began. They sat in silence as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The years stretched behind them, full of memories both joyful and sorrowful, easy and difficult. But through it all, they had faced everything together, their love growing stronger with each passing season. Thomas came back to the ranch after college, bringing with him a wife and new ideas for improving the operation. Catherine taught school in Wallace and married the doctor's son, a gentle man who adored her. The twins eventually did start their own ranch in the next valley over, close enough to visit regularly but independent. Kendrick and Fiona became grandparents, and then great-grandparents. Their home remained the center of family gatherings, the place everyone came for holidays and celebrations. The love they had built together rippled outward through generations, a legacy more valuable than land or money. When Fiona was 65, she fell ill with pneumonia during a harsh winter. For weeks, she hovered between life and death while Kendrick sat beside her bed, refusing to leave, holding her hand and talking to her constantly, reminding her of all the reasons she needed to stay. "You cannot leave me yet," he told her one night when her breathing was especially labored. "We have more years to spend together, more sunsets to watch, more grandchildren to spoil. I am not ready to say goodbye, Fiona. I will never be ready." She squeezed his hand weakly. "I am fighting," she whispered. "I am fighting because I love you, then keep fighting. I need you." "We all need you." Slowly, painfully, she recovered. The illness left her weaker than before, but her spirit remained strong. Kendrick was even more attentive after that, treasuring every moment they had together. They celebrated their 40th anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The house overflowed with family, with laughter and stories and love. Fiona looked around at all they had created together and felt profound gratitude. "When I think of that frightened widow stepping off the stagecoach 40 years ago, I can hardly believe I am the same person," she told Kendrick that night after everyone had gone home. "You are not the same person. Neither am I. We grew and changed together, became better versions of ourselves because of each other. You have any regrets? Not a single one. You. Only that I did not meet you sooner. But then, perhaps we needed our first loves to teach us how to appreciate each other." "Always so wise," he murmured, pulling her close. They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had nearly every night for 4 decades. Kendrick passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 74, lying beside the woman he loved. Fiona woke to find him gone, his face serene, his hand still holding hers. The grief was immense, a physical pain that threatened to break her. But she had learned long ago that love and loss were intertwined, that one did not exist without the possibility of the other. She held his funeral at the ranch, under the wide Montana sky he had loved so much. The entire community came to pay their respects to the man who had helped build the valley, who had been a good neighbor and better friend. His children and grandchildren spoke of his kindness, his integrity, his unwavering love for his wife and family. Fiona stood by his grave and spoke last. Kendrick Grayson told me once that I knew how to love because I had loved before. He was right. But what I did not know then was that love could grow deeper and richer with time, that it could become the foundation of an entire life. Kendrick, you were my partner, my best friend, my truest love. Thank you for taking a chance on a widow with a heavy heart. Thank you for showing me that life could be beautiful again. Thank you for 40 years of love and laughter and purpose. I will carry you in my heart until we meet again. She lived for 3 more years after Kendrick died, surrounded by family, her mind clear and her spirit strong. She took joy in her great-grandchildren, told stories about the early days of the ranch, and kept Kendrick's memory alive in everything she did. When her time came, she went peacefully, calling out Kendrick's name at the end. Her children buried her beside him on the hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and dates, and one additional line that spoke to everything they had been together. They knew how to love. The ranch remained in the family for generations. The house expanded and modernized, but still standing strong. The story of Kendrick and Fiona became family legend, told to children and grandchildren as an example of what true love could be. 2 people who had loved and lost, who had taken a chance on each other, and who had built something beautiful that lasted long after they were gone. The valley remained beautiful, the mountains unchanged, the creek still running clear and cold. And if you stood on the porch of the old house on a quiet evening, when the light was just right and the wind whispered through the pines, you might almost hear the echo of their voices, talking and laughing together, still in love after all these years. Their legacy was not just the land or the family they created, but the proof that it was possible to love more than once, to rebuild after loss, to find happiness in unexpected places. They had shown that knowing how to love was not a burden but a gift, and that opening your heart again after it had been broken was the bravest thing a person could do in the end. Their story was simple but profound. A widow and a widower, both scarred by loss, had found each other in a harsh land. They had chosen to risk their hearts again, to build a life together based on honesty, respect, and growing affection. That foundation had supported them through decades of joy and struggle, had nurtured a family, had created a home that endured. They had known how to love, and in loving each other, they had created something that death itself could not destroy. Their love lived on in every generation that followed, a testament to the power of second chances and the resilience of the human heart. Theirs was a love story for the ages, as wild and enduring as the mountains that had witnessed it, as steady and life-giving as the creek that watered their land. And though their voices were stilled and their hands no longer intertwined, their love remained, woven into the very fabric of the valley they had called home. The end.